All right. Let's see. What should we, either of you, what should we expect coming up when the legislature comes back?
Eleni, you have anything exciting on the docket?
I don't have something specific that I can bring to the conversation at the moment, because we just had a blog that I'm sure most of you have read already, where we kind of like gave a summary of what we expect to come up after the recess break and what we have been working on. Just like a first fast thought is that I felt like the bills at the House chamber were a little bit were more than the ones at the Senate side, and it felt like I was working more on the bills that came from the House. And I looked at the summary of the meet time, and it seems like that was the case, that they were a little bit busier in terms of how fast things were moving forward. I don't know if you saw that also on your side, Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, it was the same. And I'm excited as things start to swap chambers now to see what makes it all the way through the process, what sort of changes are made to bills as they trade between committees. So it's nice that we have a break right now to sort of catch our bearings and figure out what to expect coming up.
Yeah, so that's maybe a good thing to mention is that so far during the legislative session, bills have mostly been being heard in committee in either the House or the Senate. We've had some bills that have made it all the way to the floor of the House or the Senate. We have a handful of bills that have been perfected. But now is really the time where they're going to start switching chambers.
I have a question for everybody who's done expert testimony. What does that mean, and what do you do when you're providing expert testimony?
I think Dr. Bickel is really the one to answer that question. She's been down to the Capitol a few times this year.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's a really serious intellectual exercise. Okay, so whenever you're sitting there and you are considered in quotes the expert, you probably really are not. So you have to think very fast and to make sure that you only present the information that these people are asking you. So I was in my life experience, I had to put only in 45 seconds everything I had prepared for 10 days, and to make sure that all the questions that I heard before were answered and only the important information is mentioned. So like I said, it's a really serious intellectual exercise. You want to make sure that the questions of the committee members are being answered. You, as a Most Policy Initiative, when we talk, we want to make sure that all the summary of the science and the research that we have done for the time that we have been given is stated. And we also want to make sure that we're not repeating information, but unless this information is very important and it kind of shows the weight of the evidence. Yeah, but it's fun. It's really nice to get to be there and represent the organization, and it's really interesting because a lot of things that you haven't thought before might come up. And I think a lot of the parties, even people who disagree with the bill and the people who agree with the bill, will ask questions because they genuinely want to know about the topic.
In this session, there's also been another way that you can submit testimony because of the pandemic. Josh, do you want to talk about your experience in submitting written testimony?
Yeah, let me briefly say one more thing about what Eleni was saying about interacting with lawmakers and answering questions too. I think what is exciting is we're starting to get into the Capitol more here is to start to get a feel for questions that maybe community members and legislators themselves have. I think the challenge for us as we're sort of hunkered away working on research sometimes is to make sure that we're seeing all sorts of other concerns and perspectives that are out of there. So I think that's a fun and exciting part that we're all looking forward to as things get a little bit more back to normal here. But yeah, while things are still a little bit shaken up due to the pandemic, this year the Missouri legislature has allowed those wishing to submit written testimony to submit it virtually. So they've set up some pretty convenient online platforms that allow you to submit your testimony in support, in opposition, or in our case for informational purposes. And then in a few rare cases, they've actually allowed video testimony so that people can use Zoom or whatever platform they're using, just stream their testimony live into the chamber, which I think is something that, who knows, maybe as even we return to sort of in-person legislating, who knows if tools like that are going to be something that stick around as a result of sort of increased uptake during the pandemic.
I think, expert testimony, I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody who's watching, expert testimony is something that we empower scientists in Missouri to do. If you just sign up for our newsletter, we have opportunities to submit written testimony. We have opportunities to meet your local lawmakers. So sign up at MissouriLSEN.quorum.us, and that's something that our newsletter is good at. It's coming out tomorrow, so keep your eye on your mailbox for that. And I think this is a great segue, Dr. Josh Mueller, for your April event. I think that's coming up. Do you want to tell us about what is happening in April and how we're going to have some capacity building workshop related to being an expert witness?
Yeah, so I have to give a shout out to Dr. Jill Barnes, one of our other fellows here at MOST, who secured a micro grant from Research America, giving us a little bit of funding to invite some speakers to talk to graduate students, postdocs, and researchers in Missouri who are interested in science policy, but maybe don't know what sort of avenues are out there for advocacy or science communication or engagement with their own local or state policymakers. So in April, starting on April 16th, so almost under a month away, I guess now, we're putting on a 3-part workshop focused on, I guess, upfront, just providing a little bit of information about what is science policy and what does that look like at the local level, state level, national level, and then also providing some information about what sort of opportunities there are at the either professional level. So maybe if you're interested in a career in science policy or a fellowship, what sort of things are out there, and then trying to get some skills that are related to the sort of thing that you do with the LSEN, Dan. Try to get folks kind of, I guess, the awareness and some of the skill set to be able to reach out to policymakers and talk to them about issues that matter to them, matter to their community, and let them bring to bear some of their scientific expertise on some of those issues. So we're really looking forward to it. Maybe we'll share that advertising. We'll try to get a graphic that's as pretty as that neuroscience in Missouri graphic that you showed earlier, Dan. I really love that one. So we'll send something around.
All right, that sounds good, and we'll make sure to share it with everybody when more information becomes available and when we get a sign up process for that. It shouldn't be too much longer. More questions about the Missouri legislature. So bills could start in the House or they can start in the Senate, and how do they move to the governor's desk then? I think it's pretty much common knowledge that the governor needs to sign bills into law, but what happens how do they get started?
Yeah, so you're right. So the bill has to be introduced in one chamber or the other, or sometimes it's introduced in both chambers at the same time or close to the same time. And then in both the House and the Senate, a bill has to go through a committee hearing. And that can be in a committee, it will be in a committee related to that topic. It has to pass out of committee, and then it has to go to the floor. It has to pass in both the House and the Senate. So everybody in both the House and the Senate has to vote on it. That's what we mean when we say on the floor. The whole chamber is voting. And then they have to pass identical versions of the bill. And so right now what we're going to see is, so on the Senate side, what we've seen so far, especially there's a bill related to education, one related to public safety, where they've taken a lot of different provisions and added them into one bill. And in the House, those bills have all been heard individually. And so when it comes to reconcile those bills, then the Senate and the House versions have to match identically in one bill. And so that means that either stuff has to be taken out of the Senate bill or things have to be added into the House bill in order for those to match and go to the governor's desk. So once both chambers have passed identical bills, then it's going to go to the governor's desk for the governor to sign. And the governor can either approve that bill or he can veto that bill. But vetoes, when they get sent back, they can be overridden by the legislature by a 2/3 vote. And so they come back in September and they'll talk about any bills that the governor vetoes during the legislative session.
Mm-hmm. You know, it seems like there's something unique about how each state goes about its lawmaking process. For instance, in Nebraska has the unicameral legislature, and I think that's the only state that has the unicameral legislature. Is there something unique about Missouri? Is there something unique about how the Show Me State does things?
You know, I've been told that our state legislature is really ambitious. So we introduce a lot of bills. We hear a lot of bills. We, talk about a lot of bills on the floor. So that's one thing that I know is not necessarily unique about Missouri, but I know that our legislators really get to work when they get to Jefferson City and try to make the most of their 5 months there. Something else that's unique about Missouri is that we actually have the 4th largest General Assembly legislative branch in the country. So we have 197 members, and that's a lot of people to be introducing bills and a lot of people that have to agree on something in order to vote it through. And so I think that always makes it challenging. We've seen some votes this year where it's literally come down to one person has made the deciding votes to either pass a bill off the floor or for that bill to be, knocked down and not passed. So yeah, it's really interesting listening to those dynamics and listening to the lawmakers kind of bring people together on a topic. And oftentimes, a lot of the things that they're passing are still bipartisan, even though we have a supermajority Republicans, and Republicans could pass things by themselves. But you still see a lot of factions within the Republican Party and ways that they have different opinions to vote on things. You'll see a lot of bipartisan efforts as well.
That's really interesting. Rachel, do you have any more questions for our fellows? Should we talk about some science notes that we have out?
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know. Is Eleni or Josh, do you have anything exciting you'd like to share related to what's coming up?
Well, I was thinking before we met today, what are some of the things that are kind of interesting over this recess week that we are going through right now? And I thought it's interesting to comment that as the legislators are taking a break, we also are taking a break from the normal, like fast phase type of schedule that we have. So this week we had like some time to refocus on the science notes that we have written so far, on the goals that we have as fellows, on some of the things that we want to accomplish by the end of the General Assembly and so on. And one of the things that is the most exciting for some of the fellows is that we were able to kind of like discuss some of the bills that are not directly related to one of the fellows' capacity. So for example, over the last couple of days, I've been working with Dr. Whitley, another fellow that we have for education, on a bill that is identical on the Senate and on the House, and it talks about providing accommodations to school teachers in Missouri as well as students to be able to express breast milk or to breastfeed at the school buildings that they teach or go to school to. So me as a new mom and really being interested in breastfeeding and all of that stuff, I've been involved in a lot of courses in the Missouri health department. So Dr. Whitley is also a fellow on education, so she knows a lot of the very specifics of how education really works in Missouri. So we thought about writing a science note on those two bills together. Another example is Dr. Miller. We also have another bill that is coming up, and we're trying to put our knowledge and an energy together to put something together. I'm the agricultural fellow. Dr. Miller is the mental and health expert. So we are going to be working here soon on a bill that is going to be heard, I think, next week. And I'm going to be focusing on the agriculture and rural type of, in the area of the rural aspect of it, and Dr. Miller is going to be focusing on the really mental health and science type of issue of the bill. Do you want to talk a little bit about that bill, Dr. Miller?
Yeah, I can talk about this and some of the other things that are on the horizon here on the health and mental health front. So yeah, Eleni is referring to, I believe it's House Bill 209 from Representative Morse, that wants to establish basically a grant program to retain and attract physicians to kind of rural and underserved areas in Missouri. So there is statewide a sort of crisis of understaffing and undersupply of physicians, nurses, healthcare providers in general, actual just establishments where you can physically go and receive treatment or go to the pharmacy or whatever the case may be. And so this is one effort to try to alleviate that. One other bill that will be heard next week is related to this workforce challenge. It deals with licensure requirements and sort of restrictions on nurses being able to practice and what sorts of tests and diagnoses they can provide. So I think it's something that has been on the radar and is just a tough challenge. It depends on all sorts of sort of macroeconomic, sociological factors. It's really hard sometimes to get doctors to move out to small towns where their practice might be smaller, their customer base, if you want to think about it like that, might be smaller. So I think that's something that, Dr. Bickle and I will both be thinking about more, and I'm sure over the summer there will be continued discussion. It's not something that's going to go away overnight, even with some progress on bills like the ones that we're talking about. I did want to mention on the sort of health front, this is unrelated, I guess, specifically to legislating that's happening, but it is good information for people to be aware of and something that we're excited about. Governor Parsons just announced that the state will move into phase 2 of its vaccination priority tier on March 29th. So in 10 days, they'll move to the next tier of sort of critical infrastructure employees. And then about a week, 10 days after that, on April 9th, they're moving to phase 3, which is all Missourians. So between those two phases, that'll be an extra 2 million Missourians that are eligible to be vaccinated. So that's good news if you're hoping to be able to get back to some semblance of normalcy this summer. And also maybe that's a good tie-in. Dan, we're going to be talking about vaccines later next month, perhaps.
You stole the words right out of my mouth there, Josh.
Great.
Yeah. In April, our April roundtable event, where we'll be talking about vaccines in rural Missouri and what may or may not make people more inclined to accept a vaccine or to believe they are useful or believe they work. So we are going to break down some of the maybe political divides that divide the difference between who may get a vaccine and who may not. So that's coming on at the end of April, and we're going to have a sign up for that here coming in the next few days. But we're very excited about that. We're getting some great speakers lined up from UMKC and here in Kansas City and from all over the state. So we are very, very excited about that. I'd also mention you talked about rural health and getting doctors and nurses out to places where people don't normally see them. And I see here in Kansas City, University of Missouri, Kansas City Medical School, and also Kansas City University of Medical and Biosciences are all expanding their campuses out into rural Missouri to help kind of fill that gap. And are we seeing similar efforts in other parts of the state with other institutions?
Yeah, I can speak broadly. I don't know at the institutional level necessarily, but I know that over the past few years, especially at the federal level, there's been an effort to distribute funding to support community health centers in rural and outstate Missouri. So I think it's something that has been collaborative. It's been something discussed across federal, state, and institutional level. I think it will be interesting to see how the sort of adoption of telehealth resources is able to maybe alleviate some of those underservice concerns about underservice. But yeah, I think it's a problem that is being tackled from multiple angles right now, Dan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would just want to remind the Peanut Gallery, everybody watching at home, that if you have questions, you can type them into the chat at the bottom of the video here, and we'll get to those questions. Our viewership is a little lower this weekend. I think it's because of spring break, and it's a beautiful day outside. Nobody wants to, be stuck by their computer. But I want to remind everybody that we have our science and the law coming up. Does anybody have any more information about this? Can anybody help us talk about this for a little bit?
I know a little bit about it. So our fellow Dr. Jenny Bratbird, who we haven't mentioned on this call, she's been coordinating this workshop. It was something, she had a conversation with some folks at the Washington University Law Center probably back last fall, and really got excited about helping train scientists to act as expert witnesses in the judicial system. So we focus a lot on the legislative branch. We do some work in the executive branch, but we do very little work in the judicial branch. And so this workshop will be in partnership with Washington University. And I am not going to quote which group at WashU because I can't remember exactly. I think it's with their law school. But they'll be talking about how scientists can use their expertise to be expert witnesses in court.
Yeah, and I want to remind LSCN members that this is a great capacity building opportunity for everyone who wants to get into engagement and get into helping to share, some of their expertise with lawmakers and with the lawmaking process and the judicial process. Let's remind everyone one more time about our roundtable event, Thinking Missouri, Neuroscience in the Show Me State. Dr. Josh Mueller has been working his butt off for this, so thank you for that, Josh. And we've got a slate of lots of guests available to come talk about everything neuroscience, and you wouldn't believe how many different subjects neuroscience touches. COVID-19, substance abuse, we're going to talk about everything. So anyway, does anybody have anything else we want to add? We're kind of running overtime here, so.
Dan, I had so many more topics on my list to discuss today, but it doesn't seem like people are that interested. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut it off.
Also, remind everybody the basketball tournament is on, so that people may have their eyes glued to that. So I know Missouri's playing this weekend, so everybody who's rooting for the Tigers, go Tigers. And other than that, maybe we'll cut it short and we'll say see you next Friday.
See you then.
All right.
Perfect. Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you all for your help. All right.
Bye.
Bye.